What's up, everybody? Welcome on into the Slate. It's a Thursday sports edition. I am Adam Kaufman, joined by Gary and Thorne. It's just the two of us. We will bounce around as we always do pretty much every day, but for some reason we've decided to make it a Thursday thing where we acknowledge these. But we will go hoops, we will go baseball, and I will let Gary, and really the man of the hour, the brains of the operation, decide which one we're going to go with first. How are you, man?
I'm not doing too bad. Kind of a nice time of year for me personally, as someone who works at like the news desk of a fantasy sports company. The end of the NBA regular season is like my Christmas because God, does the NBA suck in terms of having to keep track of all the injuries and stuff like that. So it's been a really nice week from a work perspective, if I'm being 100% honest.
Can I give you some breaking NBA news that
Sure.
just as we were coming on, we've got from Shams Charania to read the tweet. Wait, let me see it. Andrew Wiggins, Warriors forward, cleared to play game 1 against the Kings on Saturday, his first game since February 13th. And also, it has been noted 20 to 25 minutes off the bench is what is likely for Mr. Wiggins and the Warriors, who just looking ahead to what we have on Saturday in the DraftKings Sportsbook. In Sacramento, 1-point favorites, minus 105 on the on the spread anyway, minus 110 on the money line to win that game. We'll see if anything changes with the Wiggins news. Again, it just came out. So what do you think? Before we look back to what's been going on in the play-in tournament, looking ahead to Saturday, does this impact anything from your perspective?
I mean, it's definitely helpful. I think one of the reasons the Warriors have been so inconsistent this season is they don't have it's crazy that I'm about to say the steadying presence of Andrew Wiggins, considering the career trajectory of Andrew Wiggins. But no, I mean, there was a case to be made, and I think a pretty good case, that he was the second most valuable member of the Golden State Warriors in their finals victory over the Boston Celtics. Like, he's a very good player. And it's really his defensive value that I think Golden State has missed the most. I mean, they've been a really porous defensive team for the majority of the season. And look, this series in general is just weird. I mean, this is a classic case study of a thing in the NBA, or a thing we talk about more in the NBA than we do for any other sport, which is like the on-off switch. And if you look at the series line, and if you look at the money line for game 1, for this game between the Warriors and Kings, there's a whole lot of stock being put into what the Warriors could be versus what the Warriors have been this season, because the Golden State Warriors are one of, if not the worst road teams in basketball in 2022-23.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that they are favored against a Kings team that is the 3rd seed in the Western Conference says a lot about how we perceive these two teams. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's fascinating. And Wiggins coming back, I do think at the very least that helps this defense that, like I said, has been really bad, particularly on the road. What will his conditioning be like? Not sure. I would assume because he was away for a personal matter and not away because of an injury, his conditioning is probably better than it would be under normal circumstances for being away from the team this long, but obviously game conditioning is different than just regular conditioning. So 20, 25 minutes, like you said, that makes a lot of sense. I would still just lean with the Kings, especially if we ever get them at plus money on the money line. And that might be where this is going now that the Wiggins news is going to propel even more people to bet on the Warriors. But I get it. Again, they're the Warriors. They're fantastic, but man, do they stink on the road.
Yeah, there was obviously local to me, people talking about the Celtics-Hawks first-round playoff series, which begins earlier that day on Saturday. People just sort of making light of the Hawks, despite beating Miami in the play-in tournament, and say, like, this is a joke. This is going to be a gentleman's sweep, maybe even an outright 4-game sweep for Boston. And the point was made, just going back to something you had just said, look, the Hawks, we think so little of the Atlanta Hawks. They won more games on the road this year than Golden State. So, to your point, obviously a really, really bad team away from Oracle this year. And still a club, though, that, look, you got Steph, you got Draymond, Wiggins, to whatever, degree he's going to be, as you said, fully ready to go physically as much as mentally, I suppose. Obviously, Klay Thompson, among others. This is still the defending champs. This is still a team with playoff pedigree, and one that I don't think has any stresses. That's what happens when you have 4 rings on your hand. Has any stresses in the NBA's slog of a regular season, getting to this point where now you're going up against an excited and exuberant, a confident, a lighten the beam franchise like the Sacramento Kings, who made a lot of people money. For anyone that was bold enough in the offseason and the preseason to bet them to win their division, congrats to you, or to even make the playoffs for that matter. But here they are. Let's take a look back, though. I mentioned the play-in tournament, and there are still 2 games left. They are not tonight, they are tomorrow, which is a shame because I like watching NBA, and I wish we had some action tonight. Tomorrow we've got the Bulls and Heat, as well as the Thunder and the Timberwolves, and I guess in the spirit of you never know where you're going till you know where you've been, Garion, these 4 teams that are going to play here. So the Heat, embarrassed by Atlanta. Absolutely embarrassed. Do I think they'll have retribution and beat Chicago and find their way into the playoffs and still be a dangerous team? I think they probably will, and they are 5.5-point favorites on the DraftKings Sportsbook. But they treated that game like the second leg of a back-to-back in the middle of the season, and not.
I disagree. I think they're just bad.
You think the Hawks were just that bad? That
no,
much
I just
better?
think the Heat are a flawed team, just like every other team who finds themselves in the play-in tournament. Like, I don't think they overlooked the Hawks. The Heat are just bad. Like, what are we doing here? I know Celtics fans have this weird like fear of the Miami Heat. I've been hearing about it even from like television writers who happen to be from Boston for the last 2 months. But look, the Heat, out of all the teams who were actively trying to win games this season, had the worst offensive rating in basketball. That's an 82-game sample of a team that cannot score. So we really shouldn't be shocked when they lose a game to another relatively flawed team. Look, I think in general, if I've learned anything from the 4 play-in games we've got, and this is backed up by some of the trends, right now underdogs in the play-in tournament are 4-0 against the spread and 3-1 straight up. Why is that? Because all these teams stink. Like, there are no good teams here. Good teams have already made the playoffs. These are flawed basketball teams. And right now, just kind of looking at some of these lines, like, there isn't sort of your cookie cutter, the home team gets 3 points approach to betting in basketball as there is in the NFL. But you know, I had money on the Timberwolves because why would the Lakers be 9-point favorites over anybody, considering how we've seen the Lakers play basketball this season? I had money on the Bulls. Why would the Raptors ever be 6-point favorites over any team, considering how they've played basketball this season? I just think betting the underdogs here and taking the points. I know the public is really backing the Bulls right now because I think everyone sort of simultaneously came out of this fever dream that the Heat are any good. But look, I'm not saying the Heat can't win because the Bulls are just as flawed as the Heat. The Bulls needed a team to miss 18 free throws to make it this far in the playoffs. They're also bad. But if same situation here, I think the Heat and the Raptors are very similar teams. Very physical. They're going to try to dominate the offensive glass. They use a lot of zone, and they can't score in the half court. And if this game is close going down the stretch, I would much rather be backing the team that has Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan than the team that is going to be relying on Tyler Hero primarily to create baskets. Jimmy Butler didn't look like he had that Jimmy Butler playoff switch in that first game. They got 33 points from the corpse of Kyle Lowry, and they lost by more than 10 points. Like, I just don't know what the Heat are changing to suddenly become like a scary team. Again, they might win because the Bulls also stink. But I really needed to like make sure that you knew where I stand on this. The Miami Heat are bad. They're a bad basketball team.
Yeah, I guess maybe it comes down to, one, I think so little of the Hawks, and 2, I expected more from Jimmy Butler. And the confluence of those 2 things leading to Miami losing that game, it shocked me. It did. I know it didn't shock you. It really did surprise me. Looking ahead, you mentioned most of the money on Chicago. Thank you, VSiN, obviously, the Vegas Sports and Information Network, and friends of ours here at DraftKings. The Bulls, while they are 5.5-point dogs, 80% of the handle is going their way. 76% of the bets is going their way. But if I had to, Gary, and if I'm betting one thing, I will be betting on this, by the way. In fact, I think I already did. My favorite bet in this game right now and I know it flies in the face of everything that you just talked about, especially on the Miami side. The over 208 and a half, man. 208 and a half.
It's a low total.
It is a low total. My God, I am going over. And most people are as well. Again, you've got almost 90% of the bets are on the over there, and 3/4 of the handle on the over as well. That total is, I mean, it's 20 points lower than the later game between the Thunder and Timberwolves. I'm absolutely going over, and I fully expect this to hit.
So again, I'm not saying it's a bad bet, because I will contend that at this juncture of the NBA, to open up this slate and see a game that has a 208 and a half total, your eyes are immediately drawn to that. That is an outlier number. However, if you do want the statistical background on why this number is as low as it is, the Heat are one of the slowest paced teams in the NBA. As I mentioned, they have one of the least efficient offenses of any team in the NBA. The Bulls have had the best defensive rating in basketball since the All-Star break. The Bulls also shoot the fewest three-pointers per 100 possessions of any team in the NBA. I believe they had 3 made three-pointers heading into the fourth quarter against the Raptors. These aren't two offensive juggernauts. If anything, they are kind of like mid-90s era Eastern Conference basketball teams. They love the mid-range, and they love missing three-pointers. So there, again, it's a really low number. Like, not a lot has to break in the right direction for this to go over, but the statistical profile of this game is a very ugly profile. And if you're playing the 2-game slate tomorrow, there is every reason in the world to stack the other game versus maybe just cherry picking a couple players from this particular game, because I do think it's going to be ugly.
I will absolutely be playing the 2-game slate. But before we even consider delving into DFS, let's talk about that other game. And again, what has happened in terms of just recency bias, and there are questions too. We don't know, the full scope of who's going to be available for Minnesota. Just for starters, that is relevant, obviously. But again, two teams that kind of interest me in polar opposite ways. Minnesota did everything it possibly could to lose that game to LA. I mean, was not special. I realize the Lakers, did what they had to do when they had to do it, despite, Anthony Davis and that late foul doing their best to, try and give that game away. But for the Lakers to come back in the way that they did, and the Timberwolves they basically didn't hit a shot the last 18 minutes of that game. And then you had the Thunder, who, I mean, I have been saying all year, man, and I'm not alone in this, by the way. This is not like this big brain take. The Thunder are going to be a really dangerous team in a few years. Like you between all those draft picks, the young talent they have, we haven't even seen Chet yet, the number 2 pick last year, because of his injury. Like the Thunder, it's like, holy crap, like they have got something going in OKC. And a lot of people felt that way even going into the year. To see it play out as it has this year without Chet, without those picks coming to fruition yet, just with, obviously SGA, but then Giddey and the Jalen Williamses and Dort and so many guys on that team, for this to materialize the way that it has, and for them to, I'm surprised they lost last night to begin with, but I'm awfully confident in despite being 5.5 point dogs, I'm not at all surprised that most of the money and most of the handle is on OKC in this game, despite them being the underdog. And while I have not placed a bet on it yet, I'm inclined to think that I will be placing it on that side as well.
So again, I have no problem if you just want to take the points with any of these games. It fits into my all these teams are bad sort of overarching take.
Sure. Well, even the plus 185 on the money line.
Well, I mean, sure, you can take a chance with that. I will say it is funny how we use these 1-game samples, and the Thunder were definitely the most impressive team that played last night, but that was a very low bar. You had the Pelicans obviously missing Zion Williamson, missing Jose Alvarado. There's a situation where CJ McCollum, who we found out today was playing through a torn labrum in his shoulder, did not look good in that game at all. And the Thunder still barely squeaked out with a win which I think Brandon Ingram was fouled on that made 3-pointer. I think he should have had an opportunity to go to the line and tie that game up. So was it a convincing win by the Thunder? No, not at all. They had a really good game from Lou Dort. I don't think you can expect Lou Dort to score 30 points every single game and be as effective as he was from beyond the arc. So I don't know. The Timberwolves thing is just weird. I'm very curious if Gobert plays. It seems like we're trending in that direction where he's going to be available for this game. Maybe they'll kind of use the suspension as a way to justify like bringing him off the bench or like a smaller role. I'm not really sure what they want to do. But the thing about the Thunder, and we saw this play out yesterday with Jonas Valanciunas, the Thunder have no size. And that was the thing that the Lakers used to their advantage to keep themselves in that game up until the point where the Timberwolves just stopped scoring with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. It was Anthony Davis and LeBron James getting on the offensive glass, specifically Anthony Davis. That was a lot of the Lakers' offense, was just mucking things up in the paint, grabbing an offensive rebound and having Anthony Davis put it back for two. The Thunder aren't going to be able to do that like the Lakers were. And I think there's a scenario in this game where the Timberwolves with Cat, with Rudy Gobert, just absolutely dominate on the inside. Gobert is an interesting player in the sense, too, that, you know, obviously he's not going to be directly matched up with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but Gobert is still one of the best rim deterrents in the NBA, regardless of what you think of the guy. And Shai is not a perimeter scorer. He is a shifty, cut to the basket, drive to the basket type point guard. He does it better than anyone else in the NBA, but it's still hard to finish at the rim at a high rate against a Rudy Gobert team. So I think a lot of what the Timberwolves do well, the Thunder don't have a good way to counteract that. So I do find myself, of all the favorites, leaning towards the Timberwolves taking this game. Again, the Thunder could definitely win because the Timberwolves are flawed and they are missing their best defender in Jaden McDaniels. I think that's a really underrated injury that we weren't talking about because of the Gobert situation heading into that game against the Lakers. And obviously the Timberwolves can have stretches like they did on Tuesday where they just don't score. I was really perplexed by Anthony Edwards. He just I never got the impression he would be someone who was scared of the moment, and he looked scared of the moment. He didn't want to take shots at the end of that game. Never really seemed like his rap. And that's maybe the X factor for the Timberwolves. If he can come out and play like himself in the first quarter, get some confidence, I think they could win this game running away. If he plays scared again, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not going to be scared.
You know what he should do before the game that morning? Watch Hustle.
Yeah. Or just call him. What was his? I can't remember his character's name. But
find a little confidence.
Yeah, just do whatever. But like I don't know about you, but I was so stunned by how just out of place he looked in that game. Because that is not the guy who I thought Anthony Edwards was.
No, I agree with you. I definitely agree. We'll get to baseball because obviously time is relatively tight. But before we do that, I want to take a look at the futures market here in the NBA, and some of these series have already obviously taken shape. Starts up Saturday, Sunday in terms of the true first round after about a week-long layoff for some of these teams. Bucks are the favorites, narrowly plus 265. Celtics right behind them at plus 310. Some people would flip those or could argue for flipping those. I actually think it's right. I think the Bucks should be number one. But the West, I guess, is more interesting to me because to me, the East, like those are the two teams that we should see in the Eastern Conference Finals. Mm-hmm. And I think whoever does come out of that conference final matchup is going to win the title. That's what I believe. It's what I expect. In the West, though, you have the Suns, the defending champion Warriors, who you've noted you don't think very highly of. And then obviously the Nuggets, who maybe there's some level of disrespect to plus 1,100 considering their regular season. Some people are already, I've heard multiple pundits around the league talking about the Lakers with their second half, and not second half of the game, second half of the season. Anthony Davis, the level at which he's playing, obviously what they did in the play-in game, looking at them and saying plus 1,600 if you're looking for a relative long shot, that's who you should be betting to win the championship, or at least, looking at conference winners here come out of the West. Plus 650. What is your thought process on those two conferences and most especially the West?
I mean, let's start with the East quickly because I pretty much agree with you 100%. I don't think there's much value in trying to find a long shot in the East. I think by far the Bucks and Celtics are the two best teams in the NBA. They should be in the finals of the Eastern Conference. I am a little bit intrigued by the number the Cavaliers are getting right now. I think I said this maybe in like late February. But if there was going to be a surprise team in the East, I still think it's the Cavs. It's surprising to see their number this low because they played really, really well all year. They had some really legitimate success against both the Bucks and the Celtics in the regular season. They fought for the third spot in the Eastern Conference with the 76ers. They have scoring. They have the best defense in the NBA by defensive rating. So a little shocking to see them at I don't think there's a 76ers at plus 475, Cavaliers at 15-1. I don't think there's that much separation between those two teams in particular. I think those should probably be closer to like plus 700, plus 800 in my mind. So there's value on the Cavaliers. I think that's undisputable. But what that means when you know they have to go up against the Bucks in the second round, it's just a tough thing to kind of swallow. So probably not looking to invest too much in the East in terms of long shots. The West is just crazy. And I mean, you said that I don't really have a level of respect for the Warriors. I want to make it clear. I think the Warriors, if they come out of the Western Conference, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, that's the most shocking thing that's ever happened. It's the Warriors. It's just that when we talk about betting the Warriors or betting the Lakers, there's no value. It's like betting Tiger Woods back in the early 2000s. There's no value because everyone wants to do it. Like the Warriors have the fourth shortest odds to win the NBA championship, despite the fact they are the 6th seed in the West. And inherently that creates value other places. Like the Grizzlies have lower odds to win the finals than the Lakers do. I understand there's sort of this black cloud surrounding Memphis right now. Steven Adams' injury obviously doesn't help, and it seems like we sort of got definitive news that he's not going to be back for the playoffs. That's a pretty big blow. But Ja's back. Whatever you think about Ja and what he's gone through the last couple months, he's back playing well. He's on this team again. This was a team that we all thought was going to be a top 2 seed in the West. They accomplished that despite a litany of just weird stuff happening throughout the regular season. I think there's a certain level of disrespect there. I don't know if they have the depth without Brandon Clark and without just a lot of big men in general to get this done, but 20-1 seems like pretty long odds. And then every time we talk about this, I talk about the Nuggets, where it's just like, yeah, they looked a little underwhelming down the stretch. I understand that, but they had the number 1 seed in the West locked up a long time ago. And with that comes home court advantage. And no team has a bigger home court advantage than the Denver Nuggets. Someone's going to have to play 4 games in Denver to take down the Nuggets. And it is hard to win in Denver. Consistently across the last 5 seasons, the Nuggets have had the best home net rating in basketball, and they're usually outscoring opponents by about 12 points per 100 possessions. So they're just at another level when they get to play at home, and they locked in that advantage for every series they have in the West. 11-1 just seems like a level of disrespect that I'm willing to invest in.
Are we attributing that to the altitude?
Well, yeah.
At least to some degree. All right, let's do baseball because I know it's much like basketball and well-versed in hoops, but baseball near and dear to your heart. We've already got some afternoon games that have happened before we get to the evening slate, which begins in, I guess, in about an hour, almost to the minute, actually, with Philly and Cincinnati being the first one. But we saw Baltimore come back to win today. 8-7. We saw the Red Sox, despite threatening for an actual win in Tampa, falling yet again to the Rays, who remain undefeated, off to an historic start at 13-0. I actually want to start with that game just because I'm really curious what you think of the Rays, and I'm guessing. Just, I mean, you watch the league closely in general, but just being a Blue Jays fan, you're probably watching the AL East that much closer and have for years. And you've seen obviously them rise to where they are, Tampa Bay, but people made a mockery, like our own Steve Buchanan talking about the race to 10 wins, and he placed that bet and it ended up hitting, and probably wasn't thinking that it would happen without a single loss, but it did, just because they sort of had a joke of a schedule out of the gate. with those first three series. And there were a lot of people, and I don't even mean in Boston, there were just a lot of people around baseball saying, all right, those first three series were easy, but now they have the Red Sox, who are, they're not good, but at least they're better than what the Rays had seen. And I guess Boston, to some degree, in game put up a fight within a couple of them, but still fell short, still got swept out of Tampa. And the Rays, like I said, are 13-0. Is this a team that we should be taking more seriously than I feel like people are?
I mean, I would say at this point, people are probably taking them pretty seriously. There was a big moment today. This is a team that's already having to deal with the loss of Tyler Glasnow, although the reports on Glasnow building up are relatively positive. I think he'll be back in early May. They just put Zach Eflin on the IL earlier this week. And then Jeffrey Springs, who had only allowed one earned run across his three starts prior to the fourth inning of today's game, exits with some sort of like nerve concerns in his hand. It's a very, very rare MLB injury. There's not been a lot of cases with this. The sort of recovery time is weird. It could be a couple weeks. It could be a month or two. Like, we don't really know. But at the same time, like, the Rays down three starting pitchers, you still just have this sense that they're going to figure it out somehow. Taj Bradley gets the call up yesterday, just casually one of the top 5 pitching prospects in baseball that they didn't need in their rotation to start the season, because that's who the Tampa Bay Rays are. I think it's still fair to look at their schedule and go, okay, you've had 4 series so far, and more likely than not, the 4 teams you have played will all finish dead last in their division when we're at the end of the season. So you've played a really easy schedule. Even the version of the Red Sox you saw, Adam Duvall goes on the IL right before this series starts. You have Yoshida ruled out for the final 2 games of this series. One series you have Rob Refsnyder batting in the 3 spot. Another game you have Bobby Dahlbeck playing shortstop. The Red Sox are not a serious baseball team right now.
No.
So the level of competition again is it's worth noting, but I think the thing with the Rays was always going to be, what's their offensive ceiling? And right now, Randy Arozarena is taking it to another level, which is huge. You've got Wander Franco, who was at one point last year one of the highest regarded prospects in the history of baseball, breaks his hand, suddenly doesn't have any power, and we all write him off. And now he's looking like Wander Franco again. And then you've got Brandon Lau, who back issues all of last season, but someone who's hit 40 home runs in his career. So if those guys are actually good, and then you've just got this cavalcade of platoon bats that the Rays always seem to have, if the offense is real, then this team suddenly becomes a threat to win 100 games, to win the AL East. They're going to lose at some point. I will say it probably won't be that soon. They do have to play the Blue Jays starting tomorrow. However, the first 2 games they will play the Blue Jays, they get Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi facing them in terms of starting pitching options. So 15-0 might be on the table, even though I think the Jays are easily the best team they've faced to this point. But yeah, no, take them seriously. The Rays, even like the Rays-Yankees stuff, like the Yankees have had trouble playing in the Trop and beating the Rays. Like, this is very real, and it's especially real if the hitting can at least, they're not going to have a 160 WRC plus the entirety of the season, but if they can be a top 5 offensive team, suddenly the Rays are the most dangerous team in baseball.
Do you like the plus 1,000 to win the World Series? I mean, if you were considering investing at this stage of the season at a decent number, I guess, on Tampa, it's not a great number, but it's a decent number for where the Rays have started, as opposed to the Yankees at plus 750, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in comparison to the Yankees, it's a perfectly fine bet. The problem I have with taking the Yankees, the Rays, or the Blue Jays is just there's such a massive advantage to winning your division when it comes to these World Series odds. Like having a 5-game series versus a 3-game series, where anything can happen in baseball. We saw it with the Mets last season. Almost win 110 games and they're gone in a weekend. Like, that's what happens. So I think I might be still a little bit more intrigued by like some longer shots. I still think there's value on the Twins at 25-1, just because I think they're going to win their division. Like, it's as simple as that. And Do I think the Twins are going to win the World Series? Probably not. But if they just win their division and make the playoffs, suddenly you start having hedging opportunities. And I think that's what you're kind of looking for with some of these really early in the season futures bets. So I'm not going to say Rays 10-1 is a bad bet. I just think steering clear of the AL East, generally kind of my thought process when it comes to these futures.
What are some of your favorite bets available tonight in the games that we have? And it's not a big slate, obviously, with a couple that have already happened today, but we've got 5 games or so still to be played tonight. So what are you looking at?
So actually, let's go back to talking about the Twins and the Yankees. They play each other tonight. This is a bet I will say I felt a little bit more strongly about this morning. However, the line has moved and it is now plus 100 as opposed to minus 110, which kind of draws me back in. But I'm going to take the under 8.5 in that Twins-Yankees game. The Twins, they do get Carlos Correa back tonight. Byron Buxton, who I thought might sit out tonight after having like a collision on field. Generally speaking, if Byron Buxton stubs his toe, the Twins play it safe and have this guy sit on the bench for a couple games. But they're both in the lineup tonight. That's obviously a positive for the Twins and their offensive potential. But the Twins also have a ton of guys on the IL right now. Jorge Polanco's not with the team. Joey Gallo's not with the team. Kyle Farmer got hit in the face with a pitch yesterday. He's now on the 10-day IL. There's just a lot of depth. Max Kepler also not with the team. There's a lot of depth missing. And I think the Twins are not exactly a potent offense right now, even with Correa back. As for the Yankees, kind of a similar situation in a sneaky way. Like, we're all making our Franchy Cordero jokes, but for as hot as the guy is right now. Yeah, look, it happens every year. He's this year's Matt Carpenter, but yeah, Franchy Cordero is hitting 5th for the Yankees. Like, that says more about the Yankees than it does about Franchy Cordero. Like, their offense is not great right now, and Anthony Volpe has not been hitting at the major league level. I just don't think the Yankees, aside from Aaron Judge, are all that scary. And Joe Ryan's been really good to start the season. He's got a 2.48 expected ERA. He developed a split changeup this offseason, and suddenly he's striking out 35% of the batters he's seen in 2023. Johnny Brito has been a really nice surprise for the Yankees. 1 earned run in 10 innings. Keeps the ball on the ground. He's got like a 56% ground ball rate. I just think this is a pretty low-scoring game. And then once you get later on into this contest, the Twins and the Yankees top 5 in bullpen ERA so far this season. So there's just like no bad pitchers who are going to take the mound tonight. That's important. And I think at plus 100, I think the under is going to hit in that contest. A prop that I like, little out in left field. Let's take a walks prop. Okay. Nick Martinez to walk more than 2.5 batters. This was at plus 120 last time I saw it. Nick Martinez has some control issues. He walked 5 guys in his last start against the Braves. Going back to last season, he started 10 games for the Padres. His walk rate was hovering around 12% in the games he started. That is terrible. His walk rate last season against left-handed batters, it's at plus 125 now, even better. Yep. Started the day at plus 105, so it just keeps growing, which I am perfectly fine with. Left-handed batters, he walked nearly 12% of the left-handed batters he saw as both a starter and a reliever last season. You're going to get a situation where Milwaukee has 5 everyday left-handed bats to throw into this lineup, maybe even a 6th if Victor Caratini is starting behind the plate. So this just sets up for a Brewers team that in general has the 5th highest walk rate in baseball, 3rd lowest chase rate in baseball. They've got a 350 team OBP through 2 weeks. Like, they are a team more than willing to let you walk them. And Nick Martinez is a pitcher who is more than willing to walk batters. So I think this lines up perfectly. And at plus money, I think it's really enticing.
And I'll give you a couple of props that jumped out at me just as I was doing some research. I'm curious as to what you think. I have, for better or worse, I have a love-hate relationship, Garion, with the K prop. I invest way too much into the K prop. It's fickle, as you know. We've spoken about this on this show before, how good I think the odds makers are at making these lines, because more often than not, it really does, hit or miss by that half. It's really remarkable. But Colin Ray for Milwaukee tonight, his over 3.5 at plus money, plus 120. Very popular bet tonight. Chris Bassett for your beloved Blue Jays, under 5.5. That's a minus 115 jumps out as well. Spencer Turnbull, the other side of that game, under 3.5. I guess those two in particular, like if you wanted to up the ante, up the odds for yourself, put a parlay together on those two guys in that game to both hit the under. How do you feel about that?
I would say the only worry I have about Bassett, because I'll be honest, when I was writing my best bets article this morning, I took a long, hard look at Chris Bassett under 5.5 strikeouts. I agree with you. It's a pretty enticing number. The worry I would have is just the Tigers are such a strikeout prone team that it's kind of a chicken and the egg scenario where Bassett's not a strikeout pitcher, but the Tigers strike out against everyone. So is this a case where a poor pitcher is propped up by a terrible lineup? And that's sort of my fear. The Tigers have the highest strikeout rate in the American League right now. They're striking out in almost 27% of their plate appearances. Bassett looked a little better in his second start. I still think he's on washed watch for sure. But not a strikeout guy. He's not getting swings and misses so far this season. So I don't hate it. I really don't. There's a 10-15% chance that the Tigers just shellac him in like the first, second, or third inning, and he doesn't even make it that deep into this game. I think there's a chance of that happening. My confidence level in Chris Bassett is pretty low right now. But again, the area of hesitation that I would have is just the Tigers strike out so much because they really do just have like 5 quad A bats in their lineup. And that's just going to lead to a lot of strikeouts against even mid-level MLB pitching.
What do you think of Ray for the Brewers going up against the Padres? I know you talked about the Padres on one side of the game. How about for this? Because when it comes to plus EV, he's about, again, based on projections I'm looking at, he's about as good an option as you have as far as pitchers going tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's interesting just in the sense that we didn't really know for the longest time who was even starting this game for the Brewers. Generally speaking, when these situations present themselves, the number's just going to be a little off. Now, granted, you've got to pay a lot of juice to take the over here at minus 200. And I think the book is admitting that they don't really have a good sense for what exactly Colin Ray is, how deep he's going to work into this game necessarily. But the Padres are a relatively middle of the pack team when it comes to strikeout rate. There's nothing about them that worries me that they won't strike out 3 times. So I think it's a perfectly fine bet. I just think it's more,
better be 4 times.
Yeah. I just think it's one of those situations where you look at it and go, maybe this is better as a part of a single game parlay than it would be just as like a standalone bet.
Sure. Makes sense. What about, we've got to go in a moment or two. It's always football season, folks. The draft is coming up, but there are still sims in sim land. We've got the Titans and Chargers coming up in just a few minutes, but very quickly, a favorite DFS player too tonight.
On the diamond, I think that you've got to look at the Reds, surprisingly. There's a couple nice options there. I think the Cardinals are probably going to be a lot of people's favorite stacking option. You look at Vince Velasquez. He's just looked terrible in his first 2 starts of the season, specifically against left-handed bats, which is a big problem against the Cardinals. They have a ton of very cost-effective left-handed bats as well. I think if you start with Brendan Donovan, who's $4,600, that's a pretty good place to go. Obviously, they've got, like Alec Burleson is hitting second tonight. I think he's $3,200. Like, you can get a lot of these really cheap left-handed bats into a lineup against Vince Velasquez. And obviously, you can use Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt if you want as well. The Jays are going to be a really popular stack, but they're expensive. I think the really interesting debate is who's your starting pitcher too, because Nick Lodolo is pretty clearly the number 1 guy on this slate. After that, I think there's a case to be made that Joe Ryan is probably justifiably priced, just again with his 35% strikeout rate. I've got no problem getting a piece of Joe Ryan. And I do like Brito as well. The strikeout rate, not nearly as high, but I like what I've seen so far out of him. And like I said, that Twins lineup is just pretty beat up. They've been having trouble scoring runs so far this season, and I don't think it's overly surprising given a quick glance at their inactives list.
All right, time for us to go. Thanks to our producer Eamon, undercover boss Tom, our technical director. A lot of hoops and diamond talk here in this show today. We're going to do more of it tomorrow, previewing a little bit more extensively, even those play-in games, those final play-in games before round one in the NBA playoffs officially begins over the weekend. The slate comes your way as it does, usual time, about 5:15 Eastern. The Sweat in the morning at 11. Make sure you check out both of those shows. And Gary, and always a pleasure, man. Thanks for all the insight.
It was a lot of fun, man. Happy to do
All
it.
right, I'm Adam. We'll see you later.